let's talk about spanking students.
This episode of the Christian Principles Podcast is brought to you by the Herzog Foundation. And as always, the thoughts and opinions expressed within this episode are those of your hosts and not necessarily the Herzog Foundation. Welcome to the Christian Principles Podcast. I am Matt George.
And I don't feel like I should put my name on this one, to be honest. No, I'm Mark Zockoll. I'm excited. This will be this will be a strong conversation because this is meaningful to our schools in so many ways because of a number of things. I'll even talk about in our time today, talking about this article by Caden Mills, published actually today at NPR. Is 15 states have laws that allow corporal punishment in schools. Here's where and why. And if you are following us on YouTube or Spotify, a place where you have a visual component, you can check out what we're looking at as we're sharing our screen with you right now. Before I keep going, though, let's hear from the Herzog Foundation, as well as GradeLink Student Information Systems.
This episode is brought to you by our partners at the Herzog Foundation, whose mission aligns beautifully with ours to advance and support Christ-centered education. The Herzog Foundation exists to catalyze excellence in Christian schools, helping more children experience academic rigor, biblical truth, and strong moral character, all in a safe and nurturing environment. Whether through teacher training, principal development, or strategic media efforts, the Herzog Foundation is committed to helping you, the Christian school leader, fulfill your calling with excellence. Their vision is bold but clear: a national renaissance in Christian education that impacts culture for generations. At the Christian Principles Podcast, we're proud to stand with the Herzog Foundation in that mission. Learn more at herzogfoundation.com. Together, we're building schools and futures on the rock of Christ. And as always, tell them that the fellas here at the Christian Principles Podcast sent you their way.
With GradeLink's parent app, parents can easily check grades and updates right from their phones. And they'll even get automatic alerts if a grade drops or an assignment is missing. That means fewer calls to the office and more time saved for your staff. Check it out at cpp.gradelink.com to learn more.
Matt, when you were coming up through Calvary Baptist School in Clymer, was there corporal punishment delivered to peers and perhaps your own backside?
I don't know if it was still on the books as available. You would think if anybody would have known, it probably would have been me. I will say, however, I was spanked in school one time, but that's because my mom was present the day I got in trouble. So, nobody really had a say in that, including me.
Oh, man. Well, folks, we're talking about corporal punishment, and if you didn't know this, and again, we're starting with the baseline. If you didn't know this, there is no federal legislation concerning corporal punishment in schools. There's not. Of course, we have child abuse things we can point back to, and just other laws in the books. But when it comes to corporal punishment as a measure in a public school, as this article notes, and as you know, I say I've known because I dealt with this at our school, but then more so as at the graduate studies level, I have this exact question with students a lot because it is one of those interesting tidbits that is seemingly a holdover from before, but still available and still secularly available. As noted in this article, 15 states explicitly allow corporal punishment in public schools. And again, if you can see the screen right now, you'll note that in Wyoming, Montana, Kentucky, Arkansas, Tennessee, North and South Carolina, Georgia, Alaska, Mississippi, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Arizona, Texas, and Florida, corporal punishment is explicitly allowed in the school. It's not explicitly banned in Kansas, Maine, and Kentucky and Connecticut. It is explicitly banned in the rest of the states and only in South Dakota and in Indiana. Is it unknown? Probably because of some of the wording of the law surrounding this sort of thing. But as you can see, It is something the federal government leaves up to the state governments to decide for themselves. And these ones here in this, what color is that? That color is like a turquoise, like a dark turquoise. It's not peacock.
Yeah.
Like, are these public schools still allow corporal punishment to be a part of their public school? Now, what would be the interesting overlay for our audience would be, what if any legislation at all would cross over from the public to the private? And I'm sure that whoever created this review wasn't really concerning themselves with private so much as they were with public. And so it could very well be that the public school laws of the state are written in such a way that the private schools are demanded to follow. Interestingly, in the state of Maryland, that's not the case. In Maryland, these religious exempt schools are allowed to operate as they see fit, and that would include corporal punishment. So just an interesting place to start this conversation.
Yeah, my initial reaction is I'm surprised there's any of that turquoise on this map. It's just like, even if there was one state that was turquoise, I think it's still a worthwhile conversation, because it's interesting in a time where, there's so it is so icy for adults working with minors to be having any kind of physical contact. Like, that's like immediate lawsuit. Like, I don't know how schools, other than as a direct connection of, in order to have the best interest of the kids in mind, to make sure that they toe the line, there is a consequence that they may not want to see. I mean, just like when you deal with governments that still institute certain types of physical punishments, crime rates tend to be low because nobody likes, getting strung up by their thumbs. So, whatever it may be, like, I would have to imagine, without doing a ton of research, that that's going to be the main driver of why these states, we could say, they're also southern states, and, the South kind of does their own thing. I guess maybe you could say that. but yeah, I would guess the driving factor being, like, if we don't have this, what, no pun intended, what stick do we have to make sure the students and the families are following the rules?
Okay, so saying so, we should back up a little bit. We should back up to, of course, what the Word has to say about this. And there, of course, is a broad stripe of Christian and Bible followers that we will be in heaven with someday, who believe the spare the rod, spoil the child. Proverb is exactly that and should be read literally, and so on and so forth. And there's going to be quite a number who are in the middle saying, while I'm not saying that shouldn't be the case, that we should repeal from those who believe it appropriate to spank their child. And we're not talking about abuse, folks. We're not talking about abuse at all. We're talking about a measured discipline, which I'm never going to get behind at all. Spanking is abuse. And there are absolutely those on the other side of this argument who would say that not only any, just spanking, forget corporal punishment. They would say that any harm coming to a child, or any point at which a child feels discomfort, that is also inappropriate. In fact, let me just scoot up here to show you this. The American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry defines corporal punishment as anything done to cause pain or discomfort in response to a child's behavior. If we just went with that definition from the AACAP, which, by the way, I didn't look up where the AACAP stands on things like transgender surgery and whatnot, so I'm not citing them as anything other than their own words here in this discussion. But it's pretty obvious that there are people on one side of this discussion who would say, we don't literally do anything to cause pain or discomfort to a child in response to a behavior. So we don't have to look for it. It's right there in the article. The author did a wonderful job of showing it to us, So setting up our range, and we would say that Christians can be found on probably all points of that range. But traditionally, Bible believers have been on the part of that range, which would be, we will allow parents to enforce their punishments as they see fit, and spanking is not going to be something we're taking away from them as a possible punishment. Now, further on, for our purposes, of course, we're talking about Christian schools here. We're talking about Christian school leaders. Now, I wonder how many of our leaders are a part of schools right now that had corporal punishment somewhere in their past or in their present. More than likely, that number is far less than what it was. My personal experience with this, um, I don't even want to put it on the record, but my personal experience with this does involve being an administrator at a time when corporal punishment was on the books in Maryland. So, at a school in Maryland. Now, I would say it also involves a time when that came off of the books in Maryland at that school, and we no longer took advantage of that opportunity. But this is not the much too distant past for me, and I imagine for some of you, you've seen some of that trajectory as well, or perhaps you're relatively newer to the Christian school space, and this is all just, wait, what a second, you're drinking from fire hydrant as you're listening to this, you have no idea. But just so you know, this is very much not what I'm going to just go ahead and say liberal media, left media, unbiblical, a non-biblically minded person would want everybody to believe, as this author says here. There is broad consensus among psychologists that corporal punishment can be harmful to children. He is stating here what is the consensus as he believes it, interestingly without citation, but he's believing the consensus. And so should you want to believe the consensus, that's, between you and whoever. So we've set the range there, gave a little bit of history, a personal history, and then just thought in general about where schools happen to be. Now, what's interesting about this article is that when you drop down, the author moves through, and of course, this article grabs attention by telling a story from a very concerned parent to begin with, whose child just underwent corporal punishment. There are claims like this: the spankings never made the behavior stop. We'll keep rolling and see another couple of anecdotal thoughts. What the data shows, we talk about best available data from the CRDC as of 21-22. I'd call to attention, the CRDC also has stances that are anti-biblical, and we don't have to hard to find them, so take that with whatever grain of salt or otherwise that you would wish to. Absolutely fine. There is education department data, and it's going to evidence what we see in many of these federal reviews, that there is a disproportionate amount of either discipline or consequence ascribed to boys of color. And he actually says this later on. I'm not reading the article out loud, but he brings that point up. He mentions Alaskan natives. You're at a disadvantage when a child knows they can't be spanked. So here we do see in this article the first bit and really only bit of the other side, you would say, if we are going to say a positive side on spanking. This is the chance for the pro side to speak out. It says this. It starts with, you're at a disadvantage when a child knows they can't be spanked. I won't have you react to that, Matt, off the cuff, but I do want to read through some of this and see what he has to say here. Randy Randleman is a licensed psychologist who works with school children. Unlike many of his peers, he believes corporal punishment can be helpful tools for schools. He's based in Oklahoma, where a school corporal punishment is legal. I've worked in over 150 small schools in Oklahoma. I go out every day and I see there's a group of a small group of kids that if they know they get a paddling, the misbehavior is done. So why would you give that up? Randleman says he helps schools implement their disciplinary procedures. Sometimes school will call him to conduct a psychological evaluation of a particular student and help determine how to respond to a student's misbehavior, which all that sounds great, that he's actually going ahead and doing all of that, as well as, saying we want all these resources open to the school to do what they need to do. Still, he considers corporal punishment as a last resort. I would never recommend the school spank a child unless it was just behavioral, meaning, he said, a student is making a conscious choice to be defiant, something he determines in his student evaluations. And then we do see, and again, we're talking about a few paragraphs that are anecdotal on one side of this article. What else are we going to really expect until we drop down and we see this Vincent, this Warner High School principal, Brian Hummingbird, who is Cherokee, said he only paddled 2 students, both at the parents' request. Again, parents' requests and other things are interesting to note in these conversations. But then we pull out this Alan Gordon. We see a picture of him in his office holding a paddle, and then of course we end the article on a picture of the paddle. Gordon swats them usually twice, and that's about the end of it. All right, I'm going to stop the sharing there, Matt. When you read this article, let's get past the general. We know NPR is by no means right-sided. We know the NPR by no means is even central, and that's not coming from me. There, you go look it up. There are plenty of sources. In fact, that's a big deal with the government, with recent discussions of national media and nationally supported media, that you don't have to wonder which side of the fence it's on. That they're getting at times even rebuked and in trouble for not presenting what is supposed to be a neutral standpoint. So anyway, all that being said, let's get past that and talk about more of your thoughts. Like you said, you were surprised. I'm kind of surprised that you were surprised, Matt. Is that just because you hadn't thought to think about this? What are your thoughts?
No, my surprise is the point of, the general consensus. When you look at national media attention, government legislation, it all tracks towards this is not a good idea. So if I were to expect on a public sector what would be permitted versus not permitted, I would assume the vast majority of being banned. It's the other kind of gut reaction of the topic when it comes to, you lose that stick again, no pun intended. If kids know that they're not going to get spanked, that the behavior continues, I think a great argument would be made of, well, if a kid knows he can be spanked, he's going to make sure he doesn't get caught. That doesn't mean the behavior discontinues. We mentioned this kind of back with the clear book bag episode. They'll just find other ways of getting away with it, but that doesn't mean that you can't make sure that there are hard and fast rules, consequences. I think no matter which side of it people are on, speaking public sector, and then of course Christian sector, it is a little bit different because we have a lot more support authority with scripture, is complete ban or just complete acceptance of it. A lot of times the main heart of the issue is just being overlooked. I think it continues to be a throw the baby out with the bathwater no matter what, because we're not getting to the heart of the issue, which I think ultimately has to come back to parenting, right? I feel like that's where Scripture is going to continue to say, where it's the parents' responsibility for the raising, nurturing of the children, and I'm either supporting that parenting style or I'm negating and hurting that parenting style. It's a difficult road when it comes to schools, but because we can't take the place of parents, but at the same time we have to hold institutional standards.
So many things to say in response and to consider. We wouldn't be doing wonderful podcasting, wonderful media development if we weren't taking a side on this. So I'll go ahead and put somewhat of a foot down on this. As a general conservative, I don't like it when the state disarms organizations from doing what conceivably is well within their rights to do. If a parent has signed up to put their child in this school and the school is conducting itself in such a way that it still has parents coming to the school and the families still want to be there and they know this is on the books and they're still signing off on it, so on and so forth, if they still are, they should have the freedom to do so, in Mark Zockoll's humble opinion. I'll continue, take a stance on this. How many persons would say, if someone had gotten my attention in a different way than I ever got my attention got, I wouldn't be where I am right now? Which goes back to, why am I taking an appropriate punishment off the table? Again, I'll say it one more time. I'm going to come back to it. I'm not talking about abuse here. We're not talking about just hitting kids to hit kids, so on and so forth. And yes, we've already established, I would say there is a difference between abuse and spanking. abuse and corporal punishment as laid out here and laid out appropriately. We know there are stories of those who look back, and I'd say fondly is too much of a statement, but just to get some of the stories about a discipline growing up are some of the stories that students and myself and peers, others would look back on and say, yeah, that was really formative for me. That that was something that I knew I was wrong. I told my father to get his filthy hands off me. And after that, I deserved everything I got because it was coming at me and I should have come at me. I'll never forget that. Well, oh, okay. All right. I'm not going to just discount that, especially again when we see people who say, I wish someone would have gotten my attention in a different manner than it was gotten previously. So there's to plant a flag, I would say, for Mark Zockoll, I want the organization to be able to do what the organization wants to do. If we're looking for a flip side or looking for another nuanced stance, I would say, but the school had better, if it is going to be a Christian school audience, Christian school they're talking to, man, you had better have so many lawyers look at that practice and so many people comment on that practice before you do it, and you have every conceivable scenario laid out in which you are going to allow this to occur. What ages, literally article list, how many SWATs, who's going to witness it, how many parent sign-offs do you get, do you contact the parent the day of, like all of that kind of stuff. You better have that down. And I'm guessing that these schools do to some extent. The school I was at did have a procedure in place. So on the rubber meets the road, if you're going to have it, you had better have all your I's dotted and T's crossed. I'll say that for Maryland, quite specifically, in the 80s, Dr. McKnight went to bat over this very issue. The state put out a handbook that was going to be a blanket across all of Christian education, and it referred to spanking, referred to corporal punishment in the same manner this article does. Just sweeping, it's bad, it's abuse. And the forefathers in Christian education in Maryland went to Annapolis and said, no. Whether I agree or disagree with you that a school should or should not punish a student, number one, we will never call that abuse when it's not abuse. Number two, in our reading of the scripture, we would say we have to do way more work to see this as not possible than to see this as possible. We have to read it a little bit with lack of literal. We have to be less than literal to read it, to see it as not possible than as possible. Therefore, I will not be advocating to follow your prescriptive, your handbook. I will not be freely supporting you bringing this handbook onto us. So in Maryland, again, we have a very clear case of how the state used this to try to subject Christian education, and there was I can't say mass, I wasn't there for it, but from what we've heard, there was as much upheaval as was needed, including other parts of the handbook, but this too, to say, please keep your distance, keep your hands off of our procedures in this way. And I refuse to sign that book, sign on that handbook, sign on your registry, which says something like, it is child abuse to do this. So there's a very real history in Maryland of this exact thing and how it was going to creep into private education and be the long arm of the law coming in, or that's a different way. I shouldn't use it that way. That's usually a positive thing. The creeping authority of government into these private sectors and into private Christian education in this way. So there's a couple of stances, and there's some history on this for us in Maryland proper. There you go, Matt. Is there anything else you really want to bring up about this?
Yeah, I just keep going back to the whole thought of, just like we do with communicating content and instruction, it's never a one size fits all. So where spanking could definitely be effective for one, could be detrimental to another, and that's the ultimate challenge, where, the idea of the process of issuing that punishment was damaging to the child, again, just using the broad terms. It's always going to be I feel the position of legal advice and everything of, just to stay away, because then you don't have any. It's no question that you're above board. But the way I've handled it in dealing with parents with a child that is, we'll say, asking for it, even if you are a school that practices, as you mentioned earlier, you are going through so much communication, clear communication, documentation to make sure that you are, both parent and school, arriving to the same conclusion that this needs to happen in order for us to progress and move forward. So yeah, I don't think it's a very easy cut and dry one way or the other, but the way I've seen it abused most of the time is it is just like well, that's what we do, and so we're just going to do it, and it's not really taking into consideration parents' feelings, wishes, whether it's going to be effective for the student or not. But yeah, I continue to just go back to, if I'm going to present what I believe biblically is the best practice, I have to go to encouraging parents to do the best practice, and I'm going to be reinforcing what it is that they do.
Let's go further down that parent conversation right now. If we're in the 1940s and 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, perhaps, America, and we want to say most parents, was corporal punishment far more readily seen? I'm going to suppose, from all I know of yesteryear, that the answer is absolutely yes. So it could have been that, and at that point it would have been the Christian schools, because there were so few of them in the, if any, 30s, 40s, and 50s and whatnot. But we get forward in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and perhaps that matching of parent and school wasn't common. But for those who saw any kind of growth or lasted or whatnot, it's most likely the case that now what was in unison between church and home probably, or yeah, church and home, and church, school and home and whatnot, school and home anyway, it's probably not in unison like that anymore, because now I would imagine, guessing on the average, as Caden says in this article, that most don't practice corporal punishment, just on the average. Okay, so now there's that incongruence. But the button pusher in me wants to say, well, is that a reason for a school to change what it believes appropriate before God? Because the school is founded on certain biblical truths, so there's going to be something it stands on that no matter who comes to the school, if they want to change it, the school's going to say no. So how far away does that go? There's going to be obviously biblical things that the school isn't going to change, but we don't have to look too far to find things which are extra biblical, which the school is never going to change. Their flavor, the flavor of that Christian school is never actually going to change anything. Doesn't really matter how many parents walk away. They would probably wind up perishing as a school before they ever changed a stance on something that would be extra biblical. Every school has a couple of those anyway. So where does this come? It's all well and good to say, well, if the parents aren't on board, well, maybe we should reconsider. We don't say that for everything. We say that for certain things. When it fits our narrative, we say that sometimes more than others. But there is going to possibly be a point at which there is that incongruous relationship, and a decision is going to be made to maintain what the school has put forth in its mission and the way it goes about completing that mission, or to, I don't want to say bow to the parents' wishes, but consider the parents' wishes and change if they believe change to be appropriate. So it is interesting what we've brought up here about just in general which society we're preferring, and you bring up parenting, how parenting has changed as well in the course of what we see. And we'll ask you, at your Christian school, is corporal punishment still in the books? If it is it practiced often? Are you in some of those states? Are you not? If it's not, was it ever? And tell us your stories. I'd love to hear from you about this, absolutely. But also tell us a little bit about what you've heard if you are in those states that practice paddling still. Are you seeing what Caden brings up here about Alan Gordon in Oklahoma and at Warner High School and others like him? What have you heard? What have you seen? Tell us about it. Matt, we should go and spotlight an administrator now.
Yeah, we should do that. So, for our episode today, we are shouting out Stephen Carlson of Crosspoint Christian Academy, administrator in Indianapolis, Indiana.
All right, Stephen, it's time to pray for you now. Father in heaven, I thank you for Stephen and all that he does there at Crosspoint Christian Academy. You are a good God who knows exactly what Stephen needs today. We do ask as a good father that you would go about providing for him and for Crosspoint all that they need to be successful as their year probably has already started there in Indiana so that they may be successful throughout the year. If they have major policies they're reviewing, if they have historical policies that they're looking to either affirm or adapt in some way, give them much wisdom, give them unity of mind, soul, and spirit. We love you, Lord. Amen. All right, folks, thanks for growing with us today.
We want to thank you for listening. We're honored that you spend this time with us each week. Our heart is to bring you practical conversations and resources that really serve you as a Christian school leader. One of the best ways you can help us spread the word is by leaving us a review and sharing the podcast with other Christian school principals you're connected with. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Join the conversation and share any posts that resonate with you. Every share makes a difference in helping more leaders find encouragement and practical tools. And remember, the podcast is just one way we help. We also love serving schools through speaking and workshops. Our keynotes and sessions are designed to give you actionable strategies you can take back to your team and implement right away. If you'd like more details, just send us an email at info@christianprinciplespodcast.com. We'd love to connect. Until next time, thanks for joining us on the Christian Principles Podcast.